Welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things relating to your well-being, including interviews with experts in the fields of nutrition, physical and mental health, and my 5-Minute Food Facts series. I am Amanda Hayes, your host, a nutritionist with a passion for well-being. Before I introduce today's guest, I will take a moment to let you know that you can subscribe to my podcast on YouTube, hit the red subscribe button, or on your favourite podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. I will also mention that although I will often be speaking with experts, any information or advice provided in Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast is not intended to be used to treat, cure, or prevent injuries or medical conditions, and is not a substitute for advice from your own health professional. Today I am chatting with William Pullen. He's a psychotherapist based in London. He helps people work through their issues using dynamic running therapy, a method that he developed. It has been described as a radical new approach to mindfulness. I hope you enjoy this discussion. I find the whole concept really interesting, and I've been practicing some of William's methods during my own runs. It's my pleasure to be chatting with William Pullen today. Hi William, welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, and thank you for being
Hi,
a guest.
Amanda.
William, to set the scene for us, can you please explain to me and our listeners what a psychotherapist does and how that differs, and I expect overlaps to some extent, with what a psychologist does?
With pleasure. So a psychologist really sort of tries to understand the world in terms of disorders and tries to treat you according to a disorder. So it's quite prescriptive. That's my understanding. Of course, I'm not a psychologist. As a psychotherapist, on the other hand, we are much less interested in what disorder. We're not interested in naming things. I think there's by the way, some therapists are, but I would say the majority aren't. And there's a fear that in the process of naming, you pathologize and you entrap people into different ways of being, and also you bring in your own particular history of all the people you've treated, and you imagine that that's all relevant. Now, as a therapist, your primary job is to sort of witness people. It's to travel on a journey with them. It's not to name the things along the way necessarily. So it's more organic.
Right. It sounds like it involves quite a lot of empathy then, you know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's probably the most important. And wisdom.
Yes. So what drew you to qualifying as a psychotherapist?
Well, I was very short on wisdom. When I was about 39, I had all sorts of fairly poor lifestyle choices, and I had a bit of a meltdown. You can see all of this and details of it in a TEDx talk I did, which is on
I've watched
YouTube.
It.
Have you?
I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Oh, great. Well, so so I end up very depressed and I'm feeling very sort of lost and powerless. And so after a while, I took up running, and I took up psychotherapy. I took up psychotherapy first. That helped. I then took up running. That helped a whole lot more. And about a year later, I asked my therapist whether I might start training if he thought I was a good candidate. And he said, yeah, sure, why not? And so I did. And I started training, and I always felt that I'd probably make a better... my interest was more an academic interest. I felt I wasn't sure I'd be qualified, the right sort of person to be a therapist. You know, one always worries that one's own history would interrupt you. But in fact, in the world of therapy, we call ourselves, or we are known, we don't call ourselves, but others call us, the wounded healers, because actually, you know, if you have dealt quite well with your own drama, it gives you a front row seat and a front row experience to helping others.
Yeah, and that's probably where the empathy comes in as well, isn't it? You have a personal understanding.
Yeah. Yes,
so
absolutely.
What did the training involve?
So you do you do a foundation course, which lasts about a year. And that's really to discover whether you have any sort of interest in any skills. Then you'll do a master's, which takes about 2 years. And then you do what's known as a placement. And that's about 450 hours, hour by hour, of working as a therapist in sort of drop-in centers and places like that, typically for free. And that takes about 3-4 years. It's hard work, let me tell you.
Like
I mean, it would be, yeah. And there's not much money out the other side of it either. So, for all that hard work, you could train to be a doctor in the same amount of time or something else and make much more money. I always tell people who are interested, I say, for God's sake, don't do it for the money.
Yeah, as long as you're going in with your eyes open, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, you're a doctor, right, Amanda?
No, I'm a nutritionist. There's not a lot of money in that either. So we have to do other things on the side.
Yes, unless you write a best-selling book.
Yeah, that seems to be a good option. So you trained to become a psychotherapist, and you said you took up running. So is running something you came to in your late 30s or early 40s?
Yes, it is, and it was so instrumental in my recovery that I really and I noticed how, as I was running it did all these things for me. It gave me a sense of confidence, gave me a sense of being grounded, and felt recently. It gave me a sense of empowerment, and it made talking easy. I was running with a friend, and it was really easy to open up, and I found myself able to drill down more easily. In fact, not even drilling down, because that makes it sound like I'm the driller. It was more like it just came up and it flowed easy and naturally. It didn't feel awkward, and it just, the answers were there, and the working through it was there. And so I thought, if I can combine this, if I can turn this into one of the 400 approaches of psychotherapy, then this could be really great.
Yeah, well, that leads to my next question. So you obviously merged the therapy and the running, and you've come up with dynamic running therapy, which has been described as revolutionary and a radical new approach. So that's really interesting. Can you tell us what dynamic running therapy is? What does it mean?
Well, if you were to do it with, so I've got an app. You could do it with the app, and it looks like one thing there. If you do it via the book, it looks like one thing there. If you do it with me personally, it looks like another thing there. So let's say that we're talking about doing it with me, then it's really much more organic. So it's just like therapy on the move, really. Instead of sitting with me, we go out. And it's open-ended, it's a 50-minute session, but this could be 6 months, 6 years, 6 weeks. And we're going to talk through the things that are important to you. But two really important parts there are, one, I'm going to be informed by what I notice your body telling me as you tell me things. You speed up, you slow down. I'm also, I hope, going to enjoy, and you're going to enjoy, that process of stuff coming up and you working through it. And really important to it, actually, is your decision of how you want to move and use that 50 minutes. Because when it's person to person, the session is led by the client. And so we've got 50 minutes. You can run through the whole thing. You can sit through the whole thing. Mostly people combine the two, and normally it's about 10 minutes of running if I was to average it out.
So if you had 6 clients in a day, theoretically you could run for 6 lots of 50 minutes.
Yes.
You must be very fit.
But it's not like... I'm pretty fit, but yeah, it's never like that. It's more like 10 minutes of really slow running. People don't want to. People know. I mean, and one of the things I say to people is, don't come to do dynamic running therapy if you think it's a get fit program, and don't come here if you think that you're going to use your body to strive and push through these emotions, because you're not. You're just using it to help the flow a little bit, and stopping and learning how not to push yourself is probably going to be as important as learning doing the DRT in any other way.
So the movement just facilitates the flow then, from what I'm understanding.
That's correct. And then there's this other really important piece where we travel side by side, and that creates a camaraderie. It enhances the therapeutic alliance, which research shows is a really important component to therapy outcome. There's a sense of doing two things together, and two fairly timeless things,
Yes.
movement and talking. And I think that then it exploits something that's deep down in our DNA. I think that's why the stories come up so easily. Anytime you're in a car side by side with somebody, often you'll end up storytelling,
Yes.
and opening up. And parents know it's easier to talk to their kids in that way. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
a big part of it. There's a power part there as well, where as a client, I've had to come to you. I've had to travel to the park. I'm going to take every step you take. There's no hiding out for me. I'm having to run along with you
Yeah.
here. I'm engaged. That's quite reassuring for a lot of people. And I'm also not staring you down. We're side by
No.
side. And I think that can be much less intimidating.
Yeah,
So I
it
like to
sounds
think
like
that,
it.
yeah. Sorry, I interrupted. Go
No,
on.
no. I was just wondering though, because it's called dynamic running therapy, what about clients that come to you and say, "Oh, I don't like running or I can't run." Then what?
Well, I always say, walking works as well. I always like to get I like to get the heart moving because I think that helps the sense of engagement in the
Yeah.
process. So if we can do the fastest walk they can get going, I still think that has more than enough value on it,
Yes, I guess
in it.
humans weren't made to just sit down all day, were we? So I think I can understand why moving helps the process. Um,
Yeah.
and so, what are some of the results that you've seen?
Well, I think it's immediately empowering. I think that's one of the things.
Mm,
You notice people that have really felt out of their bodies and disembodied, disenchanted with the world. Suddenly, there's fresh air and there's a sense of being somewhere and doing something with the body.
yeah.
When we get emotionally upset, trauma tends to take us into the mind, and that takes us away from the body. So any methodology for returning to the body, that's why singing in a choir is so therapeutic, or joining a drum beating group.
Mm.
You're using your body. Rhythm is there, and it gets you out of the mind and back into the greater world.
What about, we touched on this very briefly, but your own running experience? So you came to running late in life from the sounds of it. Do you love running now?
I love running with other people.
Right,
If with other people, I love running about 90% of the time,
right.
95%. Without other people, it's probably down to sort of 50%. I like chatting to people. It takes my mind off the run.
Yeah, exactly. Although today
You
I
know,
went, sorry, you go.
no, no, you go.
I was going to say today I went on my run and I practiced your counting to 10 steps
Oh yeah.
repeatedly as a way of meditation. And that was great because I was getting a bit tired, so it took my mind off it. So,
It's funny. I was doing exactly that last night because it's bank holiday weekend, or it was yesterday. Um, And I had gone out to the countryside here in England to a place called the Chilterns, which is west of London, some mountains, hills rather, about 50 miles west of London in the Thames Valley, just above the
nice.
Thames itself. And I'd been for a 10-mile walk there. And then I joined my run group in the evening, and that meant a 4-mile run. And I was pretty exhausted. It was the hottest bank holiday in history. So I
Oh,
was
really?
hot and dehydrated. My legs were tired. But when I started to really suffer, I just started doing the counting thing as well. And it
Mm.
really does help.
Yeah, it
It really
definitely
helps to take
helps.
you. So, yes, count.
Yes, I like that, so I'll keep doing that. So, William, you've also written a book which is called Run for Your Life, Mindful Running for a Happy Life. That's the English title. What's the title of the book in the US?
Running with mindfulness.
Running with Mindfulness, just in case we have
Yeah.
any listeners in the US. And so what prompted you to write the book?
Well, frankly, I was friendly with an agent. I'd always had a hope to give something to the world of self-help, to the world of therapy. It's always, I mean, I've been reading self-help books since I was God knows what age. And I've been studying philosophy since I was God knows what age. And just the human condition fascinates me. So I had this fantasy, and it all seemed to come together. You know, it began with me depressed. Then I became a therapist. Then I thought, let me see if I can develop this into a therapy. I mean, it was a long shot. You know, it's not as though, 90% of the population is doing dynamic running therapy. It's still a niche approach. But then Penguin seemed to be interested in publishing my book on a book on using running and mindful running to create better mental and physical health, and it's in 13 countries now, so I'm quite proud of it.
Oh, right, fantastic. So it's been translated as well, has it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
even in Taiwan they're running around doing it.
Ah, excellent. Can you tell us a bit about how the book is set out and structured?
Yes, I can. So what you'll find in there, a bit like the app, you'll find 20. Actually, no, that's not true. It's actually different. So in the book, you'll find different chapters for different conditions. Um, so there's anger, there's depression, there's anxiety, relationship problems, all sorts of things. And in each chapter, I provide you with a bunch of questions to run with, and then a place to fill out the answers. So you hold the day's question on the subject of anxiety. How does anxiety affect you? What is your relationship with it? What are the choices? What are your expectations? These sorts of things. And I ask you to run with it and then write down. And then you reflect on the 20 sessions that you've had running. And so that's a sort of methodology in the book as well, is a good description of mindful running, mindful walking.
One of the chapters in the book that William is particularly proud of is focused on parents running with their children. And this is what he says about it.
There are a bunch of questions in there that you can ask them about their life in it, and just make running easier, or make getting to know your kid easier through running.
The book is also a workbook. It contains spaces for you to write answers to specific questions. For example, in the chapter on anxiety, one of the questions is, what words would you use to describe the anxiety you feel?
Well, also, I think writing helps with two things. It helps to clarify what you're trying to say. When I get particularly upset, I'll suddenly remember, oh God, journal about it. It really helps to get it out of the self and onto a piece of paper, and you actually feel bizarrely relieved. So it has a double power. So it's no accident that it's journaling in there.
One of the things I really like about your book is you talk about forming a relationship with yourself. And this is really interesting to me because it's come up a lot in the podcasts I've done with other people in relation to mental well-being and things like this. So when you talk about forming a relationship with yourself and self-acceptance, what does that mean?
Well, it's funny because I think particularly for older generations, when I mentioned that to my mother, that was a critical theme throughout the book. She said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean a relationship with yourself?" So I know some older generations can find that very, very sort of weird and new agey and literally quite impossible to understand. But what I'm talking about is how you manage the feelings that you have about yourself and the world, what you do with those feelings and those understandings that you have about who you are. And I'm always asking people to take care with that. Don't just lazily play the same bad, broken record about how you're a bad and broken person. Be more gentle with yourself, be more understanding. Everybody's bad and broken, okay? Start from that place and work backwards and just notice. So I ask people to notice the quality and quantity of their inner dialogue, and to make effort to change it here and there, to soften the words, to start to notice the process. Notice when that record comes on. You don't have to play the whole record. Look, there's that record. I can turn it off. Why not turn it off? Because I've played the record 300 times. I already know what that song sounds like.
So why do you think then, you said we're all bad and broken, why are we all so hard on ourselves?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, I think a big part, apart from religion, which I think has probably as much good, if not more, than it has bad, I would say that it's the parents. As animals, we're hotwired for survival, and your parents' job is to incubate you as children and teach you about the difficult ways of the world. And one of the things they have to do is to teach you discipline, because if you can't, if you're undisciplined for them, you're going to cause havoc for the whole family. So they need you to be a decent player within the family. But more importantly, when you grow up, if you have no self-discipline, if you have nobody saying, yeah, I probably better go to work, it probably is the right thing to do, then you are much more likely to end up homeless, I suppose, or without a family, without a career. And so it's a survival-based thing, I think. But then I'd also add that I think there's something about the superego in psychoanalytic terms. It's a way of knowing the self. In order, you create the illusion of the self in the first place, and then you've got to master that self. So you've got to manage the ego. And if I don't manage my own ego, my own sense of self, then I might become a monster, and I might then predate other people, or I might make the mistake of thinking I'm too fantastic, at which point everybody leaves me because they can't bear me.
It sounds almost like the opposite to Buddhism, where you try and have no ego. So
yes,
interesting.
it really is. I think it really is. And I love Buddhism. I'm probably more Buddhist than anything else, and I love the idea that most of your problems come from a place of desire. Either you desire more of something or you desire less of something.
Yeah, your attachment to things.
Yes, exactly. And are you Buddhist?
I love it as well, and I follow a Buddhist course, but I'm a learner.
Yeah. Oh, beginner's mind.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. That's where we've all got to stay. And then we die. I mean, that's the best. That's the nice. And you know what? With beginner's mind, it's not just about having space to learn, but it's also about having humility, which it's not that I need to pat myself on the back for having humility, or other people are going to think I'm fantastic for having humility. It's not that. The value of humility comes in the place where I don't have to believe that I have all the answers and that I'm on top of everything all the time. I can just live in a state of experimentation and openness, and it's a much more emergent sort of way of living than the person that's trying to nail down the hard realities of the world.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Another thing that you talk about in your book, well, it comes up often, is nature, and you mention shinrin-yoku, which is the Japanese forest bathing that they practice over there, which is very good for mental well-being. Do you think that dynamic running therapy is enhanced by being in nature?
Unquestionably. It happens on an organic level, in the body, with movement, with hormones, with light, with the smells, with the organic compounds that you take into your body that improve. There's lots of research around all of this, and how it reduces your blood pressure and things like that. All the things that help when you're anxious or depressed.
Yeah, it just seems that there are so many aspects of well-being that overlap, movement, being in nature, sleep, social connections, mindfulness. The more people I interview, the more interconnected I feel like everything is when it comes to well-being.
I totally agree. Well, I think that Cartesian split, the mind-body split, is really. It's a bit personally. I think that the same split happened with monotheism. I think that that's also a mistake. So I think that we're slightly addled with a few historic ways
Yeah.
of thinking of the world. But if we go back far enough, pre-monotheism, pre-Descartes, then we end up with a place where we once knew that when we were not feeling well or when we were feeling disconnected, what do Aborigines do? They go walk about.
Yeah.
You find your inner self and you find it in the land and you find being one with the world. Now we say to people, oh, read this book or listen to this app or you know, get on a boat and sail around the world. Or if you're stuck in a, you know, in a town out in the countryside, even if it's not in the countryside, even if you're in a city, there is still so much creativity available to you, so much expression available to you. Go and express. A lot of it's free. I mean, I picked running because I think it's free and easy
Yeah.
for anybody to
I
do,
love
and you
it.
can do it anywhere. But
And
if you
it's
can't run, then go and join a choir, go and join the drumming thing, as I mentioned. There are a million things. Go and do some musical theatre. Go and learn how to make a chair. If you're a man, making things is
yeah.
particularly good. And if you don't, better still, make the chair for somebody else. Make a bridge for somebody else.
So it sounds like doing something is a big part of your
Yes.
approach to therapy. And can we talk a little bit about the app that you've developed as well? Can you tell us how did you develop it? Where can we find it and all those things?
It's it's in the App Store, the Apple App
Yes.
Store. It's 100% free. You search for dynamic running therapy. You download it and decide whether you want to do the mindful running on it or the mindful uh, walking, or perhaps if you have depression or anxiety, then you decide to do those programs. And it has this facility where, as you're moving, um, and listening to me talking to you and asking you questions, it has a large microphone
Mm.
icon on the screen. And so you can tap that and record your answer to the question that I'm asking you. And you then later write that down. And so it's using that same process of 20 sessions, 20 minutes each. That's 400 minutes. I don't even know how long that is, 8 hours or something. It's quite a long time, is it? Um, and you can do them multiple times, but you start to create a narrative for who you are and how you relate to your condition, and that's really important.
Yep.
Expectation plays a massive role in all of these things.
Yeah, I really like the way you've got the ability to record within the app because you don't want to spend the run stressing out that you're going to forget what you were thinking about or the answer to the question you were pondering. Have you had some feedback about the app?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I was really excited because the other day somebody I was speaking to said I was in a, I was in a sauna, talking to the person next to me, who was saying that they they suffered from anxiety, and we kind of bonded over that. And and then they said, "Oh, have you tried this new app? It's fantastic." And so, you know, I have. I've had people write to me and say how great it's been, and then I've had people telling me about how it's beginning to make a little bit of an impact. So I'm excited about it. You know, it's still fairly early days. It's what, 2 or 3 years old, the app.
Right. Oh, well, I think it's great. I really like it. I've used it when I've been running. Um,
Oh,
and
fantastic.
so if people want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
William Pullen at hotmail.com or via my website, Dynamic Running
Website?
Therapy. Or you could go to my Twitter, which is Pullen Therapy, or my Instagram, Pullen, the D underscore running therapy, any of those things. Or there's a Facebook page too.
Oh, goodness. You should be easy to find. And I'll put links to all
Yes,
of that in the show notes.
fantastic.
And and your book, I think you can buy that from Amazon, is that right?
That's
Or
right.
and you've already
Yeah.
mentioned your app can be purchased through the App Store. Finally, a question I like to ask all of my guests. If you could recommend two things that all people could do to improve their well-being, what would they be?
Well, the first one I'd say is most people fail to really initiate well-being strategies. That sounds like a terrible phrase, but let's use it. A well-being strategy, even when they know they need it. And then when they do execute it, they execute it poorly. So it would be to execute it now, not later, and to follow through with it. And even if you do it badly, just do it. That would be my first one. My second one would be how to get started. The other trick to getting started on whatever well-being strategy it is to begin with a very small step. Yeah. Don't think, I'll wait till Monday when I've got more time, or next month I've got more this. Just a tiny little baby steps. Even if you just move the dial just keep the dial moving. And if you don't do it this week, if you don't continue it this week, you can do a little bit next week. Just keep the dial moving, and you'll gain momentum after a while. It's always hard at the beginning, which is why I say just do an easy step. But after about 3 or 4, research shows that after 3 or 4 times of doing something, your mind gets quite used to it. You create momentum, and then it'll just take care of itself. And you'll find yourself like me. You'll find yourself a man that used to smoke, drink, and the rest, gamble, terrible lifestyle, who a year later had given up smoking and run the Paris Marathon. And if you had told me I would do either, amazing, I would have laughed you out of a tree. And that was totally because I just thought, better to do it badly than not do it at all.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm sure I know the answer to this question, but do you feel a lot better physically and mentally?
So much better.
Yeah, like so much person.
Better. Yeah, and I also use the running for my mental health. I find it keeps me motivated I like the practice of running. It gives me something to do 3 times a week. I have friends that I run with, groups that I run with. But most of all, it gives me a lot. It just does great things for my mental health. After I've gone for a run, I just feel so much better.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I'm a mad keen trail runner. I absolutely love it. It's like my oxygen, I think.
I haven't gotten into trail running yet, but if I ever make it out to seeing you in Australia, I'll come for a run with you.
There's some great runs here. It's so beautiful. William, thank you for being a guest on my podcast. I've really enjoyed our chat today.
Amanda, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And that was William Pullen. You can subscribe to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, click on the bell to be alerted when new episodes are available. You can also subscribe on your favourite podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And you can follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Direct links to all social media can be found on the subscribe page of my website at www.amandaswellbeingpodcast.com. If you would like to contact me, you can send me a message via the contacts page on my website. Please feel free to suggest topics you'd like to learn more about and people you'd like to hear interviewed, and I'll do my best to deliver that to you. Producing the podcast is a labour of love. We put in a lot of time, money, and effort behind the scenes. So if you enjoy Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast and would like to make a contribution via Patreon, PayPal, or by Amazon to help ensure we continue to provide you with excellent content, please visit the Contribute page on my website. Finally, please take a minute to leave a rating on iTunes. It improves visibility and will help me source excellent guests. Thank you for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.